Welcome back into Boston has entered the chat here on Nesson. It's time to get back to the Bees. I love hockey season, winter sports, as you
love hockey season when they're 2-0.
I love it, period. But yes, it is even more exciting for me when they are 2-0 and potentially pushing to be 3-0. They get ready to take on the Buffalo Sabres, who are going to be clawing for a win after getting shut out by the Rangers. And let's just say the opportunities were there for the Sabres. 37 shots on goal, trying to get past Igor Shesterkin, but things just did not fall in their favor. So now we've got to see how the Bees can make sure that, well, they stay in that temporary state of torture just a wee bit longer. Adam, Saturday hockey, it's full swing starting tomorrow. What do you think about this initial competition coming into play here? Because you know that you can't count out any teams, especially while this team is continuing to stick by the hard-to-play definition.
Sure.
But until we can fully say, hey, secondary scoring is there, this can be an offensive team to average about 3 goals, per matchup and a little bit more. What do we think of Saturday?
Well, the game's at the Garden, so I think there's a chance that Cam Schlittler is going to be in attendance. So
we're back to the Cam
There's
core.
just that. We got to put that out there. Maybe he's a good luck charm. If he was, again, we don't know if he was in the building.
No, do not speak that into existence.
If he was in the building for the first one, it counts. He gets that one on his belt.
Cam,
so,
I hope you're in Cancun,
yeah,
buddy. I don't know you personally, but I hope you're in Cancun.
I hope you're a season ticket holder if you were there for the first one. Look, the Sabres are not a good team. They are, there's no expectation that Buffalo is going to be a good team this year. And I recognize that there is no, from a Vegas, an odds maker perspective, there's no expectation that the Bruins are going to be a good team. I understand that. However, the Bruins are sitting at 2-0 after, as we keep talking about, a couple of hard-fought wins, one low scoring, obviously the first one against the Capitals, the most recent one, hope you took the over, higher scoring in that overtime win, Fraser Mint in the depth scoring, all these different things that we've already talked about here earlier in the show. But as you said, the Sabres team's going to come in hungry. You get shut out. You had the almost 40 shots on Shesterkin. You go 0 for 4 on the power play. I think for the Rangers on that night, there was an element of Mike Sullivan's first game as head coach, local guy.
Rebounding from their opening night loss.
Right, for sure. First win. Let's try and, get that done for him. Obviously for the Sabres, Alex Lyon, I'm looking at, some of the stats here, 29 saves. He didn't play poorly. Sabres got creamed at the faceoff dot. I don't know if you looked at that. It was 39-21.
One of my notes.
And that was
starts in the circle.
And that was a strength for the Bruins in the first couple of games. So that, we need to see both those trends continue, right? Bruins be dominant, Sabres obviously not so much. And I'm not saying they're going to account for, get doubled up in the dot, but how nice would that be? But I do think, I just think, much like the Patriots and the Saints, I don't see an element of, well, we're going to look past these guys. We're 2-0. They're 0-1. They're coming off a shutout in their first game, coming into our barn. Like, it'll be fine. It'll be a walk in the park. The Bruins recognize who they are, what level they're at, the stage of their rebuild, all of this, a hungry new head coach in Marco Sturm. I think there is obviously a question, as we highlighted earlier, as to whether Hampus Lindholm is available for this game. It'd be great if he is. If he's not, I do think you have the depth on the roster defensively to sustain not having him against Buffalo. I mean, a long run is different, but singularly against Buffalo, I think you can get by them. But, I just... There's not going to be any taking Buffalo for granted, so I don't worry about that.
And that's something that this team hasn't done.
Right.
Especially like yesterday, a testimony to that. You don't underestimate a team that you really can't figure out for say, and they didn't do it versus the Blackhawks, even though we didn't see the level of play that we saw versus the Capitals. In this one, I feel like they're going to want to clean up what was such a mess yesterday in terms of like the turnovers and just not really getting into their game, taking a while to get back into a better structure, have the pace that they had versus the Capitals, and just more of that commanding presence. They got to it a little bit towards the end of periods, but not in the totality in which they would have wanted to execute.
Well, that real quick, because I'm glad you brought that up. For all the wearing the sweater and sitting around, celebrating and screaming about the win, the Bruins did not play a great game. So there are a lot of things to clean up. So I'm sure, I know they get the off day today and well-deserved and all of that, and you'll have your morning skate on Saturday and the game at night, but you're going to have the coaches meetings and the video sessions and all this stuff, and Sturm's going to be highlighting the things that, as you said, they need to get better in that immediate
speaking
aftermath.
of video sessions, have you seen this little nerdy thing that I like to post before games just to kind of see what can go on?
Great detail.
Just to see different perspectives to take a look at. You mentioned success in the circle, and that has been favorable for the Bruins, especially being led by Elias Lindholm. We know that he can tear things up when it comes to winning, but something that the Rangers did so well is that the minute that they won out of the face-off circle, they were very quick to set up the play and make sure that they got the puck right on top of the goaltender. We saw it play out a few times last night versus the Blackhawks. If they can copy and paste that, that's something that can kind of give them a bit of an energized push there. The biggest thing that I'm kind of circling when it comes to this matchup and not underestimating the Buffalo Sabres. We've seen, unfortunately, the Bruins have a little bit of slide back in second periods. They've got this gusto in the first. Things kind of get away from them in the second, and then they punch back in the third. They're going to want to be able to contain in the third, especially versus this Buffalo Sabres team, because that's where they really loaded up and tried to command and take opportunities away from the Rangers a number of ways. That's where they started to get a totality of shots. They outshot the Rangers 14-5. So this is one of those moments, especially if there's no Lindholm on the back end, that you don't want to let the game get away from you, because you're talking about a team that's trying to prove a point. They're still trying to figure out their identity. They went through about 4 or 5 blended lines last night just to get past the Rangers also. So this is one of those things where it's kind of like who can outcoach the other and who can blend up their lines the best to kind of serve up different looks and get past the other. And I feel like this is one of those things where, like, fresh legs, video, fresh perspective, they can come in and make sure that some of these things don't get past them.
Well, also, Kasey, and you know this, being the hockey fan that you are, what's your last line of defense? It's the goaltender.
Yep.
And as good as Korpisalo was throughout moments in that game last night, and especially a couple of gigantic saves in overtime to allow the Bruins to have the time to get that Minton goal and win the thing in the first place.
Could not breathe at all during that point, by the way.
It's going to be Jeremy Swayman back in net, obviously, as they alternate here early on. And Swayman was exceptional in that first game against the Capitals. And I know, like, anything can happen any given game, all of that stuff. But this is a much less imposing offense on the other side versus the Ovechkin-led Washington team that he just faced, and looked great. And I think that Swayman, just kind of knowing him as we do, I think he is playing with a chip on his shoulder and is, either to silence the critics and remind the doubters what he was the year before in that tandem with Allmark, but also to prove to himself, if he needs to some degree, that, all right, like last year was messy. It's a messy season in general for the team, for me, the contract situation, holding out training camp, all of it. I have come in clear-headed, new perspective, financially secure, all that stuff this year, and ready. Most importantly, it looked it in game 1. And I am comfortable that we're going to see it again in game 2 for him. Yeah,
I mean, I've said it a couple of times. Just give me who he was versus Worlds this past summer, because we got a chance to catch up with him and talk with him on Hockey Hub, me and Sophia. And, like, you could just tell how much that meant to him. And you get to learn from other players. You get to hear other perspectives, and you get to sharpen your skills in a completely different way. And that's why Worlds and all these other opportunities outside of playing for your home club are very important. So I feel like we're seeing a new Sway. Hopefully that continues to catch up. And then I just think that the guys are going to be buzzing after going 2-0 in a season where they've been severely underestimated. They said it all throughout training camp. Everyone's counting us out. Well, this is the kind of team that where you continue to count them out, they're going to continue to try and prove you wrong.
And home and energy in the building and the fan. Again, we've seen it in the first 2 games. Score the first goal.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be immediate. I mean, it was great how quickly it happened last night.
Yeah.
But score the first goal. Because it just, we all know this, like, just as sports fans, whatever the sport, when your team scores first, there's just that extra layer of energy from the crowd. Even if, again, like last night, they didn't lead that game throughout. They blew a couple of leads. They were down 2-1 at one point in time. It doesn't matter as much if you get the first one out of the way, because that just kind of immediately wakes everybody up.
And kind of frees you up a little bit, too. Shout out to the fourth line that has actually been tremendous through the first 2 games as well.